and Section 2, which says there's a nationwide ban against vote dilution and vote denial. All of those pieces worked in concert to protect voting discrimination and to really realize the promise of our democracy. And today, we are now fighting for the soul of the Voting Rights Act. Because after the Shelby County decision, the floodgates have opened up, with states acting with impunity to pass discriminatory voting legislation. They've banned or limited the use of drop boxes. They've challenged limited who's eligible to vote by mail. They've created new criminal and financial penalties for election workers and voters. And they're giving partisan poll watchers nearly unlimited access to the polls. These restrictive voting laws have been passed over the past decade with the intent to make it harder for Black people to vote.
That's right.
And we are gathered today to say no. We are gathered here today with the wind on our backs after the Allen versus Milligan decision to say that we will continue to fight until the full protections of the Voting Rights Act are restored. And that means we need to call on Congress every single day and say, what are you doing to restore the full protections of the Voting Rights Act? We cannot stop until Congress does its job. We cannot stop until the iconic Voting Rights Act, which brought us to our democracy, is fully restored. Thank you.
At this time, please welcome to the stage Brother Corey Wilson. I'm sorry.
Good morning, y'all. Good morning. I have a question for you. I think the answer is democracy.
All right.
And I further hope that the second answer is now. But what do we want?
Democracy.
When do we want it?
Now.
What do we want?
Democracy.
And when do we want it?
Now.
I sit before you at a relatively young 31 years of age. I bring this up because in this short period of time, for the past 10 years, a third of my life, I have been in the streets, whether protesting against police brutality, organizing to protect our houseless and displaced individuals, and I have been a candidate for office for Alabama State Senate.
All right.
I didn't think that after I had gone through primary school, gotten through high school, graduated from college, that I'd be sitting at rallies for a third of my life relitigating the same issues that my parents and grandparents had gone through, that I thought that we as a nation had already figured out. It is true that the experiment of democracy in the United States was not fully realized until 1965, nearly 200 years after the founding of our nation. And it is equally true that in the past 40, 50, 60 years, that there are forces who hold elective office who wish to see democracy be rolled back in this nation, so that freedom and liberty for all will not apply equally for all people.
That's right. All right.
We can talk about the book bans. We can talk about the anti-immigration legislation. These tactics are not new.
That's right.
We have beaten them in the past. We can beat them again.
And again. All right.
But we have got to stay steady. I know that here today I'm preaching to the choir. And I'm going to try to be brief because I know it's hot and I know we're tired, but I'm so glad that so many of you are here today to be reinvigorated by this message. Because there is work to do in 2024. There is work to do in 2026. There are promises that have been made about protecting the Voting Rights Act. There are promises that have been made about finding a pathway to citizenship for those who are here and undocumented. There are promises that have been made about raising the minimum wage, about instituting protections for workers. There are promises that have been made. And there are forces that are seeking to work against them, have been seeking to work against them, and have successfully worked against them for over a decade. If I leave you with nothing else today, I want you to go home after this. I want you to search for, Google Project Red Map. It was a plan that was initiated back in 2010 when Republicans saw that they were losing ground, that they would find a way during the 2020 redistricting process to make sure that they would enshrine their power for another 20 or 30 years to come. I ran on those gerrymandered maps. We are here commemorating the Shelby v. Holder decision. We're here praising the Allen versus Milligan decision. That an unelected 9-member body has the power to unilaterally strip the voting rights of its citizens in what we believe is a democracy is unconscionable. It's difficult for me when I think about the myriad ways that the state seeks to disenfranchise us, whether it is through felony convictions, or whether it is through voter suppression actions, or whether it is through purging the rolls. We have been given an opportunity in Alabama by this same Supreme Court. The same Supreme Court, the Roberts Court, that would tell you that we don't need Section 4 of the Voting Rights Act because we've come so far. And yet upholds that here in Alabama, our elected officials, the legislature, the governor of Alabama, did suppress the vote, did make us vote on illegal maps. We've been given an opportunity, a grand opportunity, to ensure that we are expanding voting access and representation on our congressional maps. The Allen versus Milligan decision is one step that moves us closer to becoming what America truly should be, a democracy, a place where the promises of liberty and justice for all are not only realized, but are distributed equally. What do we want?
Democracy!
And when do we want it?
Now!
What do we want?
Democracy!
And when do we want it?
Now!
We're going to get it in 2024, in 2026, and every election hereafter.
Come on, y'all give it up for Corey. Let's go, let's go, let's go. What do we want?
Democracy!
When do we want it?
Now!
What do we want?
Democracy!
And when do we want it?
Now!
The next brother that I'm about to bring to the stage is a personal friend of mine. He's a personal mentor of mine. He's a personal role model of mine. And speaking of democracy, he just put a Democracy Now! Festival on in Montgomery. He is the lead plaintiff on the Evan versus Milligan case. He is the executive director of Alabama Forward, an organization that's changing the world, that's reaching Generation X, that's reaching Generation Zs, that's reaching all the younger generations, ABCQ, whatever you want to call them generations behind him. He is a living legend in the making. I want you to put your hands together for our own Alabama hero, Mr. Evan Milligan.
Hey, good morning, y'all. Y'all look beautiful. You know how we get at these rallies, we want to start leaning on somebody when we go too long, and everybody's standing strong. Thank you for coming today. Thank you for all of your faith, all of your hard work, all the investments that you've been making in the community. We know we're among friends right now.
That's
I want to tell y'all something personal, but first, acknowledging the creator, the ancestors, our other plaintiffs. So shout out to Kadita, shout out to Letitia, Shalila Dowdy, Greater Birmingham Ministries, and of course the ALNAACP. Alabama Forward members, Alabama Values, all of the partners, a lot of groups with Alabama in their names. Thank all of y'all. Before I start saying anything else, I want to tell y'all one quick story. When I found out about the news for our case 2 weeks ago about the ruling, our lawyer, Dewell, texted me. And I happened, when I received the text, I happened to be in Berlin, Germany. I've been a part of a group that's been looking at connections between white nationalism, anti-Semitism, and racism. And we've gone to Poland, we've gone to Israel, Palestine. So this was a trip to Germany. I didn't know that the decision was gonna come out that week. This was the first day of our trip. And if y'all remember, during the Cold War, Berlin was divided. There was West Berlin, which was more democratic, like it was more like England and France and the US, and there was East Berlin that was communist. One of our first trips on this learning experience, that Thursday morning we were in a church that was located in East Berlin, what was formerly East Berlin, the communist part. And that was the one church when Dr. King visited Berlin in 1964, that was the church where he preached. And he preached a sermon on divisions. He talked about how there were divisions between black and white in the US, just like there was a divided city in Berlin, and how the beautiful thing about that period of time, people were working it out and figuring out how to reach towards freedom and justice. And it was to get the text message in that particular place at that moment, I couldn't help but break down in tears, not just thinking about the history, but thinking about my father, from whom I got the last name Milligan, and that's the name that a lot of his friends called him, Milligan. So every time I see that name on the case, I'm thinking about him, and he reminds me of so many of you. He was a volunteer. He was a person that would go out into the community along with my mom and do all of the things y'all have never gotten medals or trophies for. You never had your name written up in the lights, but you're doing the work of freedom and democracy. And so I want to encourage y'all to continue to do that work. This day is very interesting. We're memorializing something bad that happened 10 years ago, and then we're celebrating something good that happened this year. That's the situation that our people have been in since we came to this country. Whether good or bad, we have to keep working. When Harriet Tubman would get one load and take them across the border to the north, did she stop? Did she celebrate and do a touchdown